The sun hung high and bright over the city of Los Angeles, casting long, sharp shadows across the pavement. It was one of those afternoons where the sky seemed to go on forever, a deep, endless blue that made the world feel both wide open and strangely lonely. Keanu Reeves walked along the sidewalk, his boots making a soft, steady rhythm against concrete. He wasn't walking with any particular destination in mind at first. He was just moving. To anyone passing by, he might look like just another man in a leather jacket, his dark hair slightly messy, his hands tucked deep into his pockets. But if someone looked closely, they might have seen the weight he carried in his shoulders. It wasn't a heavy, crushing weight, but a quiet one, like a backpack filled with stones that he had gotten used to carrying over the years. He had known incredible highs in his life, the kind of fame and success most people only dream of, but he had also known lows that could break a person. He stopped near a wide glass window of a closed shop to check his reflection. He didn't do this out of vanity. He just wanted to see if his face looked like how he felt. He saw the lines around his eyes, marks left by smiling and by sorrow. He saw a man who had spent a lot of time running, both on movie screens and in real life, trying to outrun memories that were too fast to catch. But today, the running felt different. Today, he didn't want to run away from something. He felt a strange, small pull to run toward something. For a long time, Keanu had found his joy in simple things. A good cup of coffee, a ride on his motorcycle through the canyons where the wind was so loud it drowned out his own thoughts, the quiet companionship of his dog. He lived modestly, giving away much of what he earned, believing that holding on to things too tightly was the surest way to lose them. But recently, a thought had been nagging at him. It was a whisper from his past, a memory from when he was a young boy with big dreams and not a care in the world. He remembered a magazine he had seen as a teenager. It wasn't just any magazine. It was a glossy, bright car magazine that he had flipped through 1,000 times. On the cover, there had been a red car. It wasn't just a vehicle to him. It was a piece of art, a machine that looked like it was moving even when it was standing still. A Ferrari. It represented freedom, speed, and a kind of beauty that didn't fade with time. Back then, he had promised himself that one day he would have one. Life, however, had a way of changing plans. He got busy acting. He lost people he loved. And the dream of the red car got buried under the noise of living. Until now, the thought came back to him with sudden clarity. Why not? He had worked hard. He had survived the darkest nights. He had given so much to the world. Maybe it was time to give something back to himself. Not because he needed to show off, but because he needed to feel that spark of excitement again. He needed to remind himself that life wasn't just about enduring. It was about enjoying the ride. He pulled his hands out of his pockets and looked up at the street signs. He knew where he was going. There was a private showroom not too far from here, a place that specialized in rare and vintage machines. It wasn't a loud, flashy dealership of balloons and flags. It was a quiet place, a sanctuary for steel and rubber. He had heard about it from a friend a long time ago. As he walked, the city seemed to blur around him. He passed people talking on their phones, laughing, rushing to appointments. He felt invisible, which was exactly how he liked it. There was a peace in being unknown in a crowd, in being just another soul walking under California sun. He thought about the journey that brought him here. He thought about the faces of the people he missed, and he wondered if they would be happy for him. He hoped they would. He hoped they would say, "Go ahead, Keanu, drive fast, be happy." The streets began to change. The busy shops gave way to industrial buildings with clean lines and large windows. The air smelled differently here, less like food and exhaust, more like oil and polished metal. It was a scent that Keanu loved. It smelled like passion and dedication. It reminded him of movie sets, of the hard work that went into making a scene look real and feel dangerous. He saw the building ahead. It was modern, with a sleek gray exterior and a wide front made entirely of glass. Through the windows, he could see the shapes of cars sitting in the cool, dim light inside. His heart gave a little thump. It was a mix of nervousness and anticipation. He wasn't the kind of guy who got nervous easily, but this felt important. This wasn't a movie scene. There was no script, no director yelling cut. This was his life, and he was about to step into a moment he had been putting off for decades. He reached the front of the building. There were no heavy wooden doors to push open, no grand barriers to cross. Instead, there was a smooth glass sliding door that sensed his presence and parted silently. It was like the building was welcoming him in, asking him to leave the heat of the outside world and step into a different reality. As he stepped through the open glass, the air conditioning washed over him, cool and crisp. The sound of the street, the honking horns, the distant sirens, the chatter of pedestrians, disappeared instantly. It was replaced by a profound silence. It was a kind of silence you find in a library or a church, a place where you speak in whispers because you are in the presence of something great. Keanu stood just inside the entrance, letting his eyes adjust to the lower light. He took a deep breath. The smell here was stronger, a rich aroma of leather, wax, and history. He looked around, slowly taking in the room. There were cars everywhere, but they weren't crowded. They were spaced out like exhibits in a museum, each one bathed in its own spotlight. There were silver ones, black ones, and even a bright yellow one that seemed to glow in the dark. But he didn't look at them for long. His feet moved with a purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. He walked deeper into the showroom, his eyes scanning the shadows in the back of the room. He was looking for a specific color. He was looking for a memory. He walked past a sleek, black sports car that looked like a spaceship. It was beautiful, but it wasn't the one. He walked past a classic convertible with white leather seats. It was elegant, but it didn't make his heart beat faster. He kept walking, the soles of his boots squeaking softly on the polished concrete floor. The silence felt heavy, but it was a comfortable weight, like a blanket on a cold night. And then he saw it. It was tucked away in the corner of the showroom, slightly separate from the others, as if it knew it was special. The light hitting it was softer, a warm amber glow that made the paint look like liquid fire. It was red, not just any red, but a deep, vibrant red that seemed to hold the light and refused to let it go. It was low to the ground, curvy and dangerous, with a stance that looked like it was ready to leap forward the second the engine started. Keanu stopped walking. He stood about 10 feet away from it, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. He didn't move closer yet. He just wanted to look. He wanted to let the reality of the moment sink in. It was real. It was actually there. The Ferrari from a magazine, the car that had lived in his head for 30 years, was sitting right in front of him. He felt a lump form in his throat, which surprised him. He didn't think he would be this affected. He thought it would just be a cool car to look at. But as he stood there, looking at the curves of the bodywork and the shine of the chrome, he realized it wasn't just a car. It was a symbol. It was a testament to survival. He had been through so much pain since the last time he had allowed himself to dream about this car. He had walked through fire and come out the other side, standing in the quiet showroom, with the sun shining brightly outside the glass walls. Keanu felt a tear escape his eye and rolled down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He let it fall. It was a tear of release, a letting go of the past. He wasn't that sad kid anymore, and he wasn't the grieving man who had lost everything. He was here. He was present, and he was finally ready to claim the dream he had left behind. He took a slow, deep breath and let it out, trying to steady the racing rhythm of his heart. The distance between him and the car closed as he took a few hesitant steps forward. It wasn't just a machine sitting there. It felt like a living thing that was sleeping, waiting for the right touch to wake it up. The red paint seemed to shift and change as he moved around it. In one spot, it was the color of fresh blood, bright and alarming. In the shadow of the wheel well, it turned into a dark, mysterious crimson. It was perfect. Keanu stopped right beside the driver's side door. He was close enough now to see his own distorted reflection in the polished chrome of the door handle. He looked at his hand, then back at the handle. He wanted to touch it, to feel the cold metal against his skin, but he held back. It felt like breaking a spell. He was afraid that if he touched it, the magic might disappear, and it would just be a bunch of metal and rubber again. The silence in the showroom was heavy, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was filled with the presence of history. Every car in the room had a story. They had been driven by people who loved them, raced by people who pushed them to their limits, and cared for by people who treated them like family. Keanu felt a strange kinship with these objects. He knew what it was like to be used, to be pushed, and to sometimes need a little care to keep going. Beautiful, isn't she? The voice came from behind him, soft and respectful. It wasn't a loud salesperson bark. It was a quiet whisper, like someone sharing a secret in a library. Keanu turned around slowly. Standing a few feet away was a man. He was older, with silver hair combed neatly back and a suit that looked expensive but comfortable. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He held a clipboard in his hands, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at the Ferrari with the same love that Keanu felt. "She is," Keanu replied, his voice a little raspy. He cleared his throat. "It's incredible." The man walked closer, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't extend a hand to shake or ask for a photo. He didn't seem to care that he was talking to a movie star. To him, the most important person in the room was the one standing in front of the Ferrari. "I'm Arthur," the man said simply. "I take care of the cars here." "Keanu," he said, offering a small, genuine smile. "I know," Arthur said, returning the smile. "But in here, we don't care much about that. We only care about who appreciates the machinery." Arthur gestured toward the car with an open hand. "This one is a classic. Late 80s. They don't make them like this anymore. Today, cars are full of computers. They drive themselves. They park themselves. But this one is pure. It has a soul. It listens to you." Keanu turned back to the car, Arthur's words sinking in. "Pure," he repeated. "That's the word." He finally reached out. His fingers wrapped around the door handle. It was cool and solid. He pulled it. The latch made a distinct, heavy mechanical clunk that echoed slightly in the large room. It wasn't the soft whoosh of a modern car. It felt real. He opened the door gently, treating it like the wing of a rare bird. The smell hit him instantly. It was a scent of aged leather, mixed with a faint, sharp odor of gasoline and the warmth of the engine. It was a smell that triggered a flood of memories for Keanu. It reminded him of old movie sets, of greasy garages where he used to work on his own motorcycles, and of road trips where the destination didn't matter as much as the drive. He leaned down and looked inside. The interior was tan leather, contrasting perfectly with the red exterior. The steering wheel was a simple, black circle without a million buttons on it. Just the basics. The gear stick jutting out of the center console looked like a chrome scepter. Keanu slid into the driver's seat. The moment he sat down, the world outside the car ceased to exist. The seat hugged him firmly, not too soft, but not too hard. It felt supportive. He gripped the steering wheel. His hands fit perfectly into the molded grips. He looked out the windshield. The angle was low. He felt closer to the ground, connected to the road. "You fit it well," Arthur said, standing by the open door. "It feels right," Keanu said. He ran his thumb over the leather stitching on the wheel. "It feels honest." Arthur nodded. "That is exactly what it is. It asks for your attention. You have to drive it. You have to listen to the engine, feel the vibration through the chassis. If you make a mistake, it lets you know. But if you treat it well, it gives you everything back. It's a relationship, not just a ride." Keanu sat there for a long time, just taking it all in. He looked at the dials on the dashboard, the speedometer, the tachometer. They were analog, with needles that would dance when the car roared to life. He imagined what it would feel like to push the gas pedal, to hear the engine roar behind him, to feel the force of the acceleration pinning him to the seat. For years, Keanu had been living a life that was fast-paced but often stagnant in terms of his own happiness. He was always working, always doing something for others. He had lost his daughter before she was born. He had lost the love of his life in a tragic accident. He had carried those losses like invisible scars. Sitting in this car, he realized that he hadn't allowed himself to feel pure, uncomplicated joy in a very long time. He had been surviving, but not really living. This car represented something different. It represented the joy of motion. It represented the idea that beauty could be created by human hands and could be appreciated by human hearts. It wasn't about showing off. It was about the private moment between the driver and the machine. "Can I start it?" Keanu asked, looking up at Arthur. Arthur smiled warmly. "I would be disappointed if you didn't." Keanu turned the key. He didn't just twist it and let go. He felt the resistance, then the catch. The engine didn't start with a buzz. It roared to life with a deep, throaty rumble that vibrated through the seat, up his spine, and into his chest. It was a primal sound. It was a sound of power being tamed. The noise filled the showroom, bouncing off the glass walls and the polished floor. It wasn't loud in an annoying way. It was loud in a way that demanded respect. Keanu closed his eyes for a second and just listened. The rumble settled into a steady, rhythmic idle. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It sounded like a giant, contented cat purring. He revved the engine slightly, just a tap of his foot. The sound spiked, sharp and crisp, then settled back down. A wide smile spread across Keanu's face. It wasn't a smile for the cameras. It was a genuine, boyish grin that reached his eyes. For a moment, the years of sadness lifted. The weight on his shoulders got a little lighter. In this moment, there was no past, no future. There was only the sound of the engine and the feeling of the leather wheel under his hands. Arthur watched him with a satisfied look. He knew that look. He saw it every time the right person met the right car. It was a look of connection. "She sounds healthy," Arthur noted. The engine was rebuilt 2 years ago by a master mechanic. Every part is original or factory spec. She's ready to go wherever you want to take her. Keanu opened his eyes and looked at the gear stick. He wanted to shift into first. He wanted to drive out through the glass doors and onto the open road. He wanted to feel the wind in his hair and the sun on his face. But he just sat there, his hand resting on the gear knob, letting the reality of the moment wash over him. He thought about the journey that had led him here. He thought about the thousands of miles he had traveled, both physically and emotionally. He thought about the roles he had played, the characters he had brought to life. Characters who often suffered, who often fought against impossible odds. In a way, he felt like those characters. He had fought his own battles. But here, in the driver's seat of this Ferrari, he felt like the victor. He felt like he had won something. "It's amazing," Keanu said softly, almost to himself. "The balance, the way the light hits the dash. It's just art." "It is," Arthur agreed. "And art, my friend, is meant to be experienced, not just looked at." Keanu took his hand off the gear stick and placed it back on the wheel. He gave it one last squeeze, feeling the texture of the leather. He knew he couldn't leave without it. It wasn't just a want anymore, it was a need. It was a missing piece of his puzzle that he hadn't even realized was lost until he found it. He turned off the engine. The silence rushed back into the space, but it felt different now. It was a warmer silence, a silence that had been broken by the music of the engine. The rumble still echoed in his ears, a ghost of the power he had just commanded. He stepped out of the car, his legs feeling a little unsteady, like he had just gotten off a boat. He closed the door gently, hearing that solid thunk again. He looked at the car one last time, seeing it not just as an object, but as a partner for the next chapter of his life. Arthur stood quietly, waiting. He didn't rush. He didn't ask, "So, what do you think?" He didn't need to. He could see the answer written all over Keanu's face. Keanu looked at Arthur, his expression serious, but filled with a new light. "I don't usually do this," he said. "I don't usually impulse buy things." Arthur chuckled softly. "Some things aren't impulses. Some things are just meant to be." Keanu nodded. He looked back at the red beauty gleaming under the spotlight. He knew Arthur was right. This wasn't about spending money. This was about honoring his own survival. It was about celebrating the fact that after all the darkness, he could still find something that made him feel this alive. He was ready to take the wheel. He was ready to drive forward. Arthur didn't rush him. He stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, watching Keanu look at the car. He could see that Keanu wasn't looking at the price tag or the prestige. He was looking at the machine the way a poet looks at a sunset. There was a recognition there. "It has a story, you know," Arthur said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Keanu turned his head, his eyes curious. "They all do, don't they?" "Yes," Arthur nodded, stepping a little closer to the red fender. "But this one fought to survive." Arthur walked around the front of the car and rested his hand gently on the hood. Keanu followed, moving slowly, his boots making no sound on the concrete. He felt a pull to hear this, though he didn't know why yet. "Years ago," Arthur began, his voice taking on the tone of a storyteller. This car wasn't sitting in a quiet showroom. It was on a track, going faster than it should have been. A young driver was behind the wheel. He was talented, but arrogant. He thought he could control anything. Arthur paused, looking at the smooth, flawless bumper. He took a turn too tight. The back end slid out. The car hit the barrier hard. Not a scratch, but a devastating impact. They said it was totaled. The frame was twisted. The engine was pushed back into firewall. It was a mess of shattered glass and crumpled metal. Keanu looked down at the car, seeing it in a new light. He imagined the twisted wreckage, the sound of bending steel. It made his stomach tighten slightly. He knew about crashes. He knew how quickly things could go from perfect to broken in the blink of an eye. Most people would have sold it for parts, Arthur continued, or just crushed it and moved on. But the owner at the time didn't want to let it go. He saw something underneath the damage. He believed that the soul of the car was still intact, even if the body was broken. Arthur looked at Keanu, his eyes searching the actor's face. He spent 5 years rebuilding it, piece by piece. He didn't just fix it, he healed it. He searched the world for original parts. He spent nights sanding down the welds until his fingers bled. He put more love into this car than most people put into their homes. Keanu let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The story resonated with him deeply. It sounded familiar. It sounded like the process of waking up every morning after losing someone you love and trying to put the pieces of yourself back together. It was the work of surviving. Is it the same? Keanu asked softly. I mean, after all that, is it the same car it was before? Arthur smiled, a wise, knowing smile. In some ways, no. The steering pulls slightly to the left if you don't hold it firm. The engine has a little tick when it's cold. A reminder the trauma it went through. But in other ways, it is better. It is stronger because it knows what the edge feels like. It appreciates the road more because it almost lost a chance to be on it. Keanu reached out and touched the hood of the car, right where Arthur's hand had been. The metal was warm, absorbing the heat of the showroom lights. It didn't feel like cold steel anymore. It felt like a scar that had turned into armor. He understood the tick Arthur mentioned. He felt he had his own ticks, his own quiet reminders of the pain he had lived through. They didn't make him broken. They just made him real. We have a lot in common, Keanu whispered, more to himself than to Arthur. I thought you might say that, Arthur replied gently. You have that look, like you've driven through some storms yourself. They stood there for a moment, two men connecting over a machine that had been given a second chance. The air in the showroom felt thick with emotion, but it wasn't heavy. It was cleansing. Keanu realized that he wasn't just looking at a Ferrari. He was looking at a mirror. This car had been crushed, beaten, and left for dead, and yet here it was, shining red and beautiful. It had triumphed over its destruction. I told myself I wouldn't buy it, Arthur said, leaning back against a metal support pillar. I told myself I was just keeping it safe until the right person came along. Someone who understands that a car isn't just an object, it's a companion. Keanu looked at the old man. You were waiting? I was waiting, Arthur confirmed. I turned down offers from collectors who just wanted to lock it in a tempter-control garage and never let it breathe. I said no to investors who saw it as a number on a spreadsheet. I wanted it to go to someone who would drive it, someone who knows that the risk of crashing is worth the thrill of the drive. Keanu looked back at the Ferrari. He pictured himself on the Pacific Coast Highway, the wind rushing past his ears, the engine roaring behind him. He wasn't afraid of the crash anymore. He had already crashed in real life, and he had survived. He had rebuilt himself, just like this car. He was ready to drive. What if I'm not the right guy? Keanu asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. It was a rare thing for him to show doubt, but this felt important. Arthur chuckled softly. Mr. Reeves, you sat in that seat, and the car looked happy. It doesn't care about your movies. It doesn't care about your money. It cares about how you held the wheel. You didn't grab it like you owned it. You held it like you respected it. That is rare. Keanu felt a warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't flattery. It was the truth. He felt a bond with his vehicle that went beyond logic. It felt like destiny, a word he usually avoided because it felt too scripted. But this felt organic. It felt like two broken things finding a way to make each other whole. "Can I take her?" Keanu asked. The question hung in the air. Arthur didn't hesitate. "If you promise to take care of her. If you promise to let her run free sometimes." "I promise," Keanu said. His voice was steady. There was no trembling now, only resolve. Arthur pushed himself off the pillar and walked toward a small glass desk nearby. He opened a drawer and pulled out a set of keys. They were on a simple leather keychain, worn smooth by years of being held. He walked back and placed them in Keanu's open palm. The keys were heavy. They felt cold and solid. Keanu closed his fingers around them. In that moment, it wasn't just a transaction. It was a passing of the torch. Arthur was trusting him with this piece of history, this symbol of resilience. "She likes the back roads," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And she likes it when you shift gears hard. Don't baby her too much. She wants to live." Keanu smiled, a full, bright smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I think I can manage that." He looked around the showroom one last time. The space seemed different now. It wasn't just a gallery of expensive toys. It was a place of healing. He realized that coming here today wasn't an accident. He was meant to walk through that glass door. He was meant to meet Arthur. He was meant to find this car. The weight of his past, the grief he carried for his daughter and his partner, was still there. It would always be there, but it felt lighter now. It felt balanced out by the excitement of the future. He had a new companion for the road ahead, a machine that understood pain but chose to run anyway. "Thank you," Keanu said, looking Arthur in the eye. It wasn't just about the car. It was for the story, for the understanding, and for seeing him as a human being rather than a celebrity. Arthur shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just go. Drive." Keanu turned toward the driver's side door. He unlocked it with the key. The clunk of the lock sounded like the starting gun of a race. He opened the door and slid back into the leather seat. It felt even better than the first time. It felt like his. He put the key in the ignition. He didn't turn it yet. He just sat there, his hands on the wheel, looking out through the windshield at the bright world waiting for him outside the glass. He wasn't running away from his memories anymore. He was driving forward, carrying them with him, but letting the wind take the weight off his shoulders. He was ready to start the engine and begin the next part of his journey. Keanu pushed the door of the Ferrari open and stepped out, his boots finding the solid concrete floor. He felt a sense of calm settle over him, the kind of calm that comes after a big decision is finally made. He didn't need to think anymore. He didn't need to weigh the pros and cons. The car belonged with him. It was as simple as that. He walked around the front where Arthur was waiting, a small, knowing smile playing on the older man's lips. There was no need for big speeches. Keanu just nodded, a single, firm movement of his head. "I'll take it," Keanu said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight of certainty. Arthur didn't cheer or clap. He just nodded back, his eyes crinkling with genuine pleasure. "I thought you might say that. Come with me. We can handle the details in my office." They walked away from the red beauty, leaving it bathed in its spotlight. Keanu followed Arthur across the showroom floor. The space felt different now. It wasn't just a showroom full of expensive toys. It was a place where his life had taken a small but significant turn. Arthur led him toward a glass-walled office at the back of the building. It was raised up slightly like a bridge, allowing a perfect view of the entire collection below. They didn't go through a heavy wooden door. Instead, they just stepped through a wide, open archway. The office was neat and uncluttered. A large desk made of light-colored wood sat in the center, and a few comfortable chairs were arranged around it. The walls were lined with framed photographs of vintage races and old black and white shots of classic cars being built by hand. "Have a seat," Arthur said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs. Keanu sat down. The chair was soft, enveloping him in comfort. He watched as Arthur went to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. The older man moved slowly, with no rush. He wasn't trying to get the deal done quickly so he could move on to the next customer. He treated this paperwork like it was part of the ritual. Arthur placed the folder on the desk and opened it. Inside were the car's history, the service records, and the title. He slid a piece of paper toward Keanu. "It's a standard bill of sale," Arthur explained. "Simple and clean. No hidden fees, No gimmicks. Just you, the car, and the open road. Keanu picked up the pen. It was a heavy metal pen, nice to hold. He looked at the blank lines where his name would go. For a moment, he just stared at the paper. In the past, spending money on himself had always been difficult. He had grown up with very little. And even when he became successful, he never quite shook the feeling that he didn't deserve luxury. He was always the one giving things away. The Rolex watches to the stunt crew, the bonuses to the crew members, the millions to hospitals. Taking something for himself felt foreign. It felt like he was breaking a rule he had set for himself long ago. But as he sat there, looking to the glass wall of the red Ferrari, he realized that the rule had changed. He wasn't taking, he was accepting. He was accepting a gift that the universe had offered him. He had paid his dues. He had walked through the fire. He had loved and lost and kept going. It was okay to enjoy the fruit of his labor. It was okay to be happy. He leaned forward and began to write. The scratch of the pen on the paper was the only sound in the quiet office. He wrote his name clearly, Keanu Reeves. Seeing it there on the purchase agreement for this dream car made it real. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a fact. Arthur watched him with respectful silence. When Keanu finished, he took out his checkbook. He didn't blink at the amount. He wrote the check with the same steady hand he had used to sign his name. He tore it out and placed it on the desk. Arthur picked up the check, looked at it briefly to ensure everything was in order, and then set it down in a tray. Thank you, Keanu. It is an honor to pass this car on to you. Keanu leaned back in his chair. Exhaling a long breath, he felt like he'd been holding for weeks. It feels strange, he admitted, looking at Arthur. In a good way, but strange. I'm so used to movement, chaos. This feels so peaceful. Peace is rare. Arthur said wisely, we should grab it when we can. He stood up and walked over to a small safe in the corner. He opened it and took out a set of keys. They weren't the temporary keys used for test drives. These were the original keys, the ones that came with the car back in the 80s. They were attached to a black leather fob that had worn soft over the decades. Arthur held them in his hand for a moment, looking at them, as if saying his own private goodbye to the machine. Then he walked over to Keanu and held them out. Keanu stood up. He looked at the keys resting in Arthur's open palm. They looked small, but they represented something massive. They represented freedom. They represented a promise he had made to himself a long time ago. He reached out. His fingers closed around the cool metal. As soon as he took them, he felt a transfer of energy. The car was his. The responsibility was his. The joy was his. Remember what I said? Arthur said, his voice serious but kind. Don't let it sit. It doesn't like to sleep. It likes to run. I won't let it sit, Keanu promised. He put the keys in his pocket. They felt heavy against his leg, a comforting weight. I think we both need to run a little bit. Arthur extended his hand. Keanu took it. The handshake was firm and dry. It wasn't the slippery, weak handshake of a stranger. It was the grip of two men who understood each other. Take care of her, Arthur said. I will, Keanu replied. And thank you for everything. Arthur nodded. Go on. The sun is still high. You have plenty of daylight left. Keanu turned and walked out of the office. He paused at the edge of the platform, looking down at the showroom floor. The Ferrari sat there, glowing in the artificial light. But he knew that as soon as he started it, it wouldn't look artificial anymore. It would come alive. He walked down the short flight of stairs and back to the car. It felt different approaching it now. Before, he was a visitor, a guest. Now he was a captain. He unlocked the door. The sound was crisp and final. He opened the door and slid into the driver's seat for the last time as a customer. The next time he sat here, he would be a driver. He put the key in the ignition. He sat there for a moment, his hand resting on the gear stick. He thought about the check he had just written. He thought about the years of grinding, the early mornings, the late nights, the tears, the laughter. It had all led to this exact second. He didn't feel guilty about the money. He realized that money was just stored energy. It was a tool, and using that tool to buy a dream was the best way to honor the hard work it took to earn it. He wasn't just buying a car. He was buying a feeling. He was buying back a piece of his own hope. Keanu looked up at the rear-view mirror and adjusted it. He caught his own eye. He looked tired, but he also looked excited. There was a glint in his eye that hadn't been there for a long time. It was the spark of adventure. He was ready. He was done with the paperwork, done with the talking, done with the waiting. The only thing left to do was drive. He wanted to feel the vibration of the engine. He wanted to hear the roar. He wanted to leave the quiet, safe showroom and merge into the messy, beautiful chaos of the world. With a deep breath, his hand tightened on the key. The metal was warm from his pocket. He turned it. The engine erupted, the sound bouncing off the glass walls one last time. It was a roar of defiance and joy. Keanu smiled, strapped on his seatbelt, and shifted into gear. He was leaving the past behind in the rear-view mirror. The open road was waiting. The engine roared to life behind him, a sound that felt like it was vibrating his own chest. It was a deep, throaty growl that filled the glass walls of the showroom, bouncing off the ceiling and the floor. For a moment, Keanu just sat there, letting the noise wash over him. It wasn't a loud, annoying noise. It was a sound of power waking up. It was a sound of a heart beating strong and steady. He shifted the gear stick into first. The mechanism felt tight and precise, clicking into place with a satisfying mechanical feel. He took his foot off the brake and pressed gently on the gas. The Ferrari didn't jerk forward. It glided. It moved like a big cat stalking to the tall grass, smooth and full of controlled energy. He drove slowly toward the large glass exit at the front of the building. As he approached the glass sliding doors, they sensed the car and parted automatically, welcoming him out into the world. The transition was instant. The cool, conditioned air of the showroom was replaced by the warm, golden glow of the Los Angeles afternoon. The silence of the garage was replaced by the distant hum of the city. But inside the car, the world was filtered to the symphony of the engine. Keanu turned the wheel. The car responded instantly, hugging the tight curve of the driveway. He felt the tires grip the pavement. It was an incredible feeling. He wasn't just driving a car. He was wearing it. It felt like an extension of his own body. He accelerated a little more, feeling the push of the seat against his back. He didn't floor it. He didn't need to. He just wanted to feel the machine work. He headed toward the coast. He knew exactly where he was going. He wanted to see the ocean. He wanted to drive along the edge of the continent, where the land met the endless blue water. It was a place where he often went to think, to clear his head. But today, he wasn't going there to think. He was going there to feel. As he merged onto the highway, the traffic was light. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and soft purple. It was a beautiful evening, the kind that makes you glad to be alive. Keanu lowered the window. The wind rushed in, messing up his hair, but he didn't care. He let the air blow across his face. It smelled like the ocean, salt, seaweed, and freedom. He shifted up through the gears. Second, third, fourth. Each shift was a moment of connection between man and machine. He remembered Arthur's words about the car being rebuilt, about how it had been broken and fixed. He could feel it in the way the car handled. It felt solid. It felt like it had earned its place on the road. It wasn't fragile anymore. It was strong. He thought about his own life. He thought about the scars he carried, some visible and some invisible. He had been through the ringer. He had lost people he loved more than life itself. There were times when he didn't think he would make it through the darkness. There were days when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. But he had made it. He had rebuilt himself, piece by piece. Just like this car, he had welded his own heart back together. He had sanded down his rough edges. And here he was, driving a dream. The car sped along the winding road that hugged the cliffs. To his left, the rocky hillside rose up. To his right, the ocean stretched out to the horizon, sparkling under the setting sun. The Ferrari took the curves with a confidence that made Keanu smile. He wasn't fighting the car. He was dancing with it. He steered with light touches, feathering the gas pedal, listening to the engine pitch rise and fall. It was a conversation without words. He realized that this was what he had been missing. It wasn't the car itself, exactly. It was a feeling of being present. For so long, he had been living in the past, remembering what was lost, or worrying about the future, fearing what might come next. But right now, In this moment, there was no past and no future. There was just the road, the car, and the wind. He saw a sign for a lookout point ahead. He slowed down and flicked on his turn signal. The soft clicking sound matched the rhythm of his heart. He steered the car off the main road and onto a smaller paved path that led to a cliff edge. He pulled into the empty parking lot and cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. The roar of the engine was gone, replaced by the sound of wind and the distant crashing of waves below. The car ticked as it cooled down, a rhythmic ping, ping, ping that sounded like metal relaxing. Keanu sat there for a long time, his hand still resting on the steering wheel. He didn't get out immediately. He wanted to stay in this bubble for just a little longer. He looked out over the ocean. The water was turning a deep, dark blue as the sun dipped lower. The sky looked like a watercolor painting, colors bleeding into one another. It was a view that millions of people saw every day, but it felt like it was just for him in this moment. He finally unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. He stepped out and walked to the edge of the cliff. He leaned against the metal safety rail and took a deep breath of the salty air. He looked down at the churning water. It was rough and wild, but it was beautiful. "I wish you could see this," he whispered into the wind. He wasn't talking to anyone specific, or maybe he was talking to everyone he had lost. He thought about his daughter. He thought about his partner. He wondered what they would think of him now, standing here in his leather jacket, next to a bright red Ferrari. He hoped they would smile. He hoped they would be happy, that he wasn't sad anymore. He hoped they would understand that this wasn't about forgetting them. It was about remembering them by living the life they couldn't. He turned around and looked at the car. It sat parked in the fading light, the red paint glowing like an ember. It looked stunning. But more than that, it looked right. It looked like it belonged there on the edge of the world, with the wind blowing through its open windows. Keanu walked back to the car. He ran his hand along the hood as he walked past it. The metal was still warm. He felt a sense of gratitude that was hard to put into words. He was grateful to Arthur for trusting him with the machine. He was grateful to the mechanics who had rebuilt it. He was grateful to Universe for giving him the strength to keep going when things were dark. Buying this car wasn't an act of selfishness. It was an act of survival. It was a way of telling himself that he deserved good things. It was a way of saying that joy wasn't a sin. For a long time, he felt guilty for being happy when the people he loved were gone. But standing here, watching the sun sink below the horizon, the guilt began to dissolve. He realized that the best way to honor the people he lost was to live fully, to feel the wind in his hair, to drive a fast car, to smile at the sunset, to be kind to strangers, to love deeply, even if it meant risking getting hurt again. The sun finally disappeared, leaving a streak of fiery red on the horizon that matched the color of the Ferrari. The first stars of the evening began to poke through the darkening blue sky. Keanu took one last look at the ocean, taking a mental picture of the moment to keep with him forever. He got back into the driver's seat. The leather still held the warmth of his body. He closed the door, shutting out the wind. The interior smelled of luxury and history. He put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life again, breaking the silence of the night. The sound echoed off the cliffs, a bold declaration of existence. He put the car in gear. He wasn't going home yet. He didn't want the drive to end. He wanted to keep moving, keep feeling the road beneath him. He pulled out of the lookout point and headed back toward the highway, turning in the opposite direction of the city. He headed toward the dark, winding canyons. As he accelerated, the headlights cut through the twilight, illuminating the road ahead. He drove with a sense of purpose and peace. He wasn't running away from his ghosts anymore. They were riding shotgun, silent and supportive. He was just a man driving a beautiful car into the night. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked bright. He shifted into a higher gear and smiled, the hum of the engine singing him a song of hope and triumph.